The oak-paneled office held its breath as the lawyer spoke Rosa's name, the maid, the invisible woman who'd scrubbed their floors for 30 years. Why was she in the will? And when the lawyer revealed what she'd been left, the family's world shattered in an instant. Bienvenidos a nuestro canal Lección Negra de Vida. Si la historia te conmovió, dale me gusta. Si eres nuevo en nuestro canal, suscríbete. Comencemos el video. The oak-paneled office felt heavy that Tuesday morning, like the air itself was holding its breath. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany table where the Henderson family sat in expensive silence. Designer watches glinted. Diamond rings caught the light. Leather shoes tapped impatiently against marble floors. They had come for what they believed was rightfully theirs, each one mentally calculating their share of the fortune their father had left behind. The atmosphere buzzed with barely concealed greed, polite smiles masking hungry eyes. Then the door opened quietly, and she walked in. Rosa Martinez moved like a whisper, her worn black purse clutched against her chest, her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. She was 72 years old, small and humble, her gray hair pulled back in the same simple bun she'd worn for 3 decades. She had cleaned their toilets, scrubbed their floors, ironed their expensive clothes. For 30 years she had been invisible to them, just another fixture in the mansion they'd grown up in. No one stood to greet her. No one offered her a seat. She found a chair in the corner, far from the table, and sat with the quiet dignity of someone who had long ago learned her place in their world. Or so they thought. The lawyer, a thin man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and began to read. His voice was steady, professional, detached. One by one, the names were called. The eldest son received the penthouse in Manhattan. The daughter inherited the art collection and the villa in France. Stock portfolios were divided. Bank accounts allocated. Smiles spread across privileged faces. Everything was going exactly as expected. This was simply a formality, a legal procedure to confirm what they already knew they deserved. They had been born into this wealth after all. It was their birthright. Then the lawyer paused. His eyes scanned the final page, and something shifted in his expression. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. The room sensed the change. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone set down their coffee cup. The lawyer's voice came out softer now, almost reverent, and to Rosa Martinez he began. Time seemed to stop. Every head in that room turned in perfect unison toward the small woman in the corner. Confusion washed over their faces like a cold wave. Rosa's eyes went wide. Her weathered hands began to shake. She had never expected to hear her name in this room, in this moment, in this context. Why would Mr. Henderson mention her? She was just the maid, just the help, just the woman who had quietly loved a lonely old man when his own children were too busy to visit. The lawyer took a breath, and what came next would change everything they thought they knew about family, about love, and about what it truly means to be rich. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the room like wildfire. Who was Rosa Martinez really? To them, she was just a name on their childhood periphery, a background figure who appeared when messes needed cleaning and disappeared when guests arrived. But they didn't know her story. They had never bothered to ask. Rosa had arrived in America 40 years ago with nothing but a battered suitcase and a heart full of dreams. She was 28, newly widowed, with a 3-year-old daughter sleeping against her shoulder. She didn't speak much English. She had no family here, no connections, no safety net. Just hope. Raw, desperate, beautiful hope. She took whatever work she could find, cleaning office buildings at night, washing dishes during the day, her hands raw and aching. When she finally found steady work at the Henderson mansion, it felt like a miracle. The pay was modest, but it was reliable. It was enough to put food on the table, to send her daughter to school, to build a life one careful dollar at a time. She worked with grace that came from dignity, not from servitude. She she never complained, never asked for raises or special treatment. She simply showed up every morning with a quiet smile and hands ready to serve. She cleaned their rooms, cooked their meals, ironed their designer clothes with the same care she gave her own daughter's school uniforms. But what they never saw, what they never noticed from their busy, important lives, was how she cared for their father. When Mrs. Henderson passed away, the mansion became a tomb of silence. The children came for the funeral, stayed for a week, then returned to their lives in distant cities. They sent cards on his birthday, called on major holidays, promised to visit more often but rarely did, and so the old man was left alone in that big, echoing house. Alone, except for Rosa. She became his companion in the quiet hours. When insomnia kept him wandering the halls at 3 a.m, she made him warm milk and sat with him in the kitchen. She listened as he told stories about his youth, about building his business from nothing, about the wife he missed with every breath. She laughed at his old jokes, even the ones he repeated week after week. She reminded him to take his medications, gently, without making him feel like a child. When he finally finished the crossword puzzle that had stumped him for days, she celebrated like he'd won the lottery. The Henderson children barely remembered her name, often calling her the Maid even to her face, but Rosa knew everything about them. She knew Michael preferred his coffee black, that Jennifer was allergic to shellfish, that Thomas collected vintage cars. She remembered their birthdays when they forgot each other's. She knew their favorite childhood meals and their deepest disappointments. To them, she was invisible, just part of the furniture. But to the lonely old man whose family had drifted away, Rosa had become something infinitely more precious. She had become his friend, his confidant, his daughter. She had become family. The lawyer's voice cut through the silence like a blade. To Rosa Martinez, who showed me what true family means, I leave the summer estate in Vermont, my entire personal library, and a trust fund of $3 million. The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the room exploded. Gasps erupted from every corner. Chairs scraped violently against marble floors. The eldest son, Michael, shot to his feet, his face turning crimson with rage. "This is absurd," he shouted, slamming his palm on the table. She manipulated him. An old man, alone, vulnerable, she took advantage. His sister Jennifer stood beside him, her diamond necklace glittering as she trembled with fury. "We're contesting this," she hissed. "Our father wasn't in his right mind. This is exploitation, plain and simple." But the lawyer raised his hand, his expression calm but firm. "Please," he said quietly, "I'm not finished." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with age. The handwriting on the front was shaky but unmistakable. Mr. Henderson's own script. "Your father wrote this letter 6 months before he passed," the lawyer explained. "He asked me to read it after the will, knowing there might be questions." He opened the envelope carefully, unfolding the pages with reverence. Then he began to read, and Mr. Henderson's voice seemed to fill the room from beyond the grave. "To my children, whom I love despite everything," the letter began. "You may not understand why Rosa receives what she does, so let me tell you who she really is." The lawyer's voice grew softer, more emotional as he continued. "Rosa gave me her own savings. Nearly $2,000 she'd been saving for years, to buy a birthday gift for my grandson when you all forgot his 10th birthday. She didn't ask to be repaid, she just smiled and said he should know someone remembered." The room went still. Michael's face shifted from anger to something else, something uncertain. The lawyer continued reading. "When I was sick with pneumonia 3 winters ago, Rosa slept in a chair by my bedside for 4 nights, not because I asked, not because I paid her extra, but because she cared whether I lived or died. She read to me when I couldn't sleep. She held my hand when I was afraid. She stayed when all of you were too busy to come." Tears began rolling down Rosa's weathered cheeks, but she made no sound. The lawyer's voice cracked slightly as he read the final words. "My children, you will inherit wealth." But Rosa inherited something far more valuable. She inherited my heart because she gave me hers freely. Remember this: wealth is not what you inherit. Wealth is what you give when you have nothing to gain. The letter ended with a simple signature. Silence blanketed the room like snow. Michael sank slowly back into his chair, his anger dissolving into shame. Jennifer's hand covered her mouth, and Rosa wept quietly in her corner, not because of the money or the estate, but because after 30 years of invisible service, she had finally been truly seen. She had been honored, she had been loved, and in that moment, everyone in that room understood what real wealth actually means. Rosa accepted the inheritance with trembling hands and a humble heart, but she didn't use it the way anyone expected. She didn't buy a mansion or travel the world or retire in luxury. Instead, 6 months later, she opened the doors to the Henderson Community Center, a beautiful renovated building in the heart of the neighborhood where she had once struggled as a young immigrant. It was a place where people like her, people who had crossed borders with nothing but hope, could learn English for free, where they could find job resources, legal help, and medical care, where they could be seen, valued, and treated with dignity. Above the entrance, carved in stone, were the words, "In memory of Charles Henderson, who taught us that family is built through love." The Henderson children stayed away at first, nursing their bitterness like old wounds. They had inherited millions, yes, but something gnawed at them in the quiet hours. They had wealth, but Rosa had inherited something else entirely. She had inherited their father's heart. She had inherited his respect, his gratitude, his love. And slowly, painfully, they began to understand what they had lost by being too busy, too important, too absent. One by one, they came. Michael arrived first, unannounced, on a gray Tuesday morning. He walked through the doors expecting to feel anger, but instead he felt something break open inside his chest. There, in the main hall, hung 2 portraits side by side. His father, smiling gently, and Rosa, her weathered face full of warmth. Beneath them, a plaque read, "Two souls who understood that true richness is measured in compassion." Michael stood there for a long time, tears streaming down his face. When Rosa found him, he could barely speak. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I didn't see. I didn't understand." Rosa opened her arms, and this grown man, this wealthy executive, collapsed into the embrace of the woman he had once ignored. "Your father loved you," Rosa whispered, her own tears falling. "He just wanted you to learn what he learned too late, that money can build walls, but only love builds homes." Jennifer came next, then Thomas, each one arriving with shame and leaving with something like peace. They began volunteering at the center, teaching classes, serving meals, finally understanding what their father had tried to leave them. Not just money, but a lesson. The story spread beyond that room, beyond that city. News outlets picked it up. Social media shared it. Millions of people watched and wept and reconsidered what they valued. Because Rosa's story reminded them of a truth the world often forgets. The greatest inheritance isn't written in bank statements or legal documents. It's written in the quiet moments of care when no one is watching, in the unglamorous acts of love that expect nothing in return, in the dignity we show to those the world overlooks. True wealth is built in service. True family is chosen by the heart. And sometimes, the person who seems to have the least is actually the richest of all.